Hey people, welcome back to the channel. This is a story in which Madara is Naruto's grandfather. He implanted his and Hashirama's cells into Naruto and trained him, which made him extremely strong. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, leave a comment if you want to suggest fanfic. Check the description for credits and support the creator of the story. So let us begin. Chapter 25. The following day, the way to Kumo had not been all that fast-paced. They were traveling at fair speeds, not in much of a hurry. It was forced much by the fact that Yugito could not run at her full speed, and neither Naruto nor Sasuke were willing to carry her all the way back to her home. But even so, if one of them was willing to do that, she would not have accepted the help. She was a proud kunoichi and would not want to be seen as weak. It was already enough that Naruto had to bail her after being defeated by Hidan and Kakuzu. Her pride as a kunoichi still mattered, and she would make sure that it was not defiled by anything. She could never really forget that battle, the battle between her and the two Akatsuki members who attempted to capture her. It was a battle unlike any she had ever experienced before in her whole Jinchuriki life. Those two had been monsters, and she had the intel given to them by Jiraiya, but still, it proved worthless as the two could not just die. She had hit them with all she could, but they took her out even in her Biju form. It was unexpected. And she had been happy thinking that she could take them on after she had seen them, but that was not to be. They had beaten her painfully, and that hurt her pride as a hailed perfect Jinchuriki. An S-rank battle was nothing she had thought she would experience in such a manner. She could not count sparring with B because they never really went all out in fear of hurting the other. But when going against enemies, she had no such fears. But Naruto was able to beat them. As far as she had been told. Sasuke did not fight at all. The blonde was the only one to have fought both Akatsuki members. It raised much questions about his power. His heroics in Kurigakure were known worldwide. But some people did not actually believe in his power. She had also thought that some people were exaggerating about his strength. But all evidence pointed that he had done it all. And here she was, he had rescued her from the Akatsuki all by himself without the help of his fellow Uchiha. Just how powerful is he? Thinking of the blonde, there was something he had said that was troubling her, so it was a setup. He had spoken those words. She had been thinking about them for quite some time now. She was not the most loved in Kumogakure. It was possible that someone might have set it up so that she could be captured. But she was quite surprised that someone would even go that far. The Akatsuki were evil. Who could have the heart to sell her to them? She was positive that the Raikage had not been the one to assign her the mission to go to outside the village. She was given the mission by one of the higher-ups in Kumogakure. It was an important mission to retrieve some important documents in Shimo. She was not supposed to see what was inside once she got hold of the documents. But she never got to reach her destination because once she was out of the village, those monsters came into her view. And now she was returning home without completing her mission. That is, if there was a mission to begin with. Still, it hurt her that someone would go as far as to sell her to the criminal organization, Akatsuki. She had served Kumogakure in all her might and will. Even though she was not loved as Killer Bee, she was still loved to some degree. But it was not everyone who liked her guts. But even so, she continued to live within Kumo, serving it. She protected the people who hated her. She did not only shield those who liked he. She was a protector of the village, thus she could not choose who to protect. As long as one was a citizen of Kumo, her protection was guaranteed without question, even if someone spat on her. The Raikage will surely kill someone if it was indeed a setup. She was like family to him. She knew that he cared for her. He was very emotional for a big man and would not hesitate to act rashly to the betrayal. It is indeed an act of betrayal that she was sent away from the village without support. He was going to kill someone without mercy. He would surely be infuriated and act without even investigating the matter thoroughly. The man was quite rash sometimes. Forget the consequences, he would say when angered. Naruto, Sasuke called, breaking the silence. Yugito looked at the Uchiha. She looked at his eyes. They were different from Naruto's. She could guess that it was the Mangekyo Sharingan. But as far as intel suggested, Sasuke did not have the Mangekyo. But that was by no means a normal Sharingan. She was knowledgeable enough to know that the Mangekyo manifested differently depending on the wielder. Each Uchiha had different eyes. Their Mangekyo Sharingans did not manifest the same, so it was no surprise to her to see that both Uchihas had different eyes. Sasuke had the expression like Naruto had. But his was a little different. It sometimes showed brief emotions of anger, while Naruto's expression was simply pure blank. She wondered how he could keep it up all the time. Even Anbu sometimes smiled. It was uncomfortable staring at him. What is it? Naruto said, not even bothering to look at his clansmen. His eyes were focused ahead on the road. Aren't you going to do something about your condition? Your chakra, Sasuke specified. Although I can live with it. It is not making her comfortable. You could tone it down a bit. Naruto was in the middle. But both Sasuke and Yugito were not traveling close to him. Sasuke was far more close to him, but Yugito was a few feet away from him. It looked like she was trying to keep her distance away from the blonde. That would be because Naruto's power was just emanating through him. It was no good feeling given that his chakra was dense and not so much peaceful. It was somewhat sinister and suffocating to those who could not stand it. He was not just releasing it. It was must merely leaking out because it was too much inside his body, and it was fluctuating in a way misbehaving manner. Because of the evil feel it gave and its oppressing nature, Yugito was not close to him. It was not out of fear or anything. She was used to foul chakra. She was a Jinchuriki after all. But the blonde just gave her a weird feeling. I told that the seals that usually restrain my chakra were breaking. Now all four of them have disappeared from my body. My chakra proved to be too much for them. It will take some control to get it to behave, Naruto explained in a calm tone. This feeling would be wonderful if he liked to enforce fear into everyone who got near him. But he was not like that. It was just at the moment he could not do anything. Well, he just was going to do it when he has made time for that purpose only. You had 4 seals containing your chakra. Sasuke asked, surprised by Naruto's words. Naruto had more chakra than him, and that was when he was thinking that the blonde did not seal most of his chakra. Sealed chakra could not be sensed. So just how much chakra did Naruto have? Yes, Naruto answered. Yugito looked at him for a moment before asking, did you release them all when fighting in Kiri? Naruto looked at her. No, he answered with a small smile. He had lied when he said he was fighting at full power. He had only released a single seal that was on his back. But the seal was equivalent to the 3 that remained. So one could say that he had used 2/3 of his chakra in Kurigakure during the Civil War. He abnormal large amounts of chakra even at a young age. There was a fact that he had Uzumaki genes within him. That meant a Senju lineage. Added to that, he was a Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi from the day he was born. Even before he was born, the Kyuubi's chakra affected him while he was still within his mother's womb. He was carried for 10 months. When Madara infused his and Hashirama's cells into his body, it only gave him another wide door to grow. The Senju cells fitted perfectly because he already had a Senju lineage blood given by his Uzumaki heritage. Uzumaki lineage, that was what Madara and Obito lacked within their bodies. Their chakra system was also not natured by the strongest Biju. The fact that he had Uzumaki, Senju and Uchiha blood made him an even perfect person and worthy to surpass the Sage of 6 Paths. Obito could not even match to that power. He could not even handle the powers of the Rinnegan, probably unlike Nagato. It was why he is allowing the latter to gather Bijus with the Rinnegan. Madara could achieve a piece of that power. But all logic dictates that he would be stronger than the man. A further increase to his power was added when he extracted the Kyuubi out of his body. Having the beast's power leave his body tempered with his chakra system in a good way. And as told, the Biju left some of its chakra inside his body as a safety measure. The chakra the Biju had left had infused with his own. But when one was a sensor they could feel it within his system. That would give a view that it had not fully fused with his own. But because of his death, it had managed to fully fuse and now could no be differentiated from his. Perhaps his body had gone through some changes as well. It would explain why his chakra was misbehaving. Perhaps the Raikage was right to brand him a threat, Yugito thought. If he had fought during the civil war in Kiri without releasing all of his power, that would mean that he was a lot more powerful than that. Then just how powerful was he? Well, at least he did not seem to have any evil intentions towards her village. But she feared how the Raikage would react once he felt the power she was feeling from him right now. She just hoped that he did not do anything stupid like attacking him. That would put the relations with Konoha in an unfavorable position. Just how much chakra do you have, Naruto? Sasuke asked in more of a thought than anything else. That feeling of jealousy was starting to creep into his mind. But it should not matter now since he has the Mangekyo Sharingan. He could now do some of the things that Naruto could do because of his eyes. It's not important to ask such a question, Sasuke, Naruto said, having heard the answer. It is high possibility that you will never be able to know the answer. There were things inside his body that no one could know about. Trying to understand his power would be meaningless as one could never find where it comes from. Maybe to you, Sasuke responded. How long till we reach Kumo? He questioned, looking at Yugito. He wanted to return to Konoha and start practicing the usage of his eyes. Keeping them activated for now was only making him feel good. But using them would thrill each muscle fiber inside his body. Within minutes at our current pace, Yugito responded. If that is so, let us walk from here on, Naruto said, receiving a look from Sasuke. We will not be returning to Konoha after we see the Raikage. We will rest for the night before returning back to Konoha. I want to take a good look at the village that raised one of the strongest kage the shinobi world has ever seen. Yugito looked at Naruto with curiosity. You mean the Sandaime Raikage? Yes, Naruto answered. He had some good qualities. The man fought with Gyuki and never got injured by attacks from the Biju. He only went down due to chakra exhaustion. He must have been really strong to receive praise from you, Sasuke said flatly. It was just rare to hear Naruto praise someone. So he does not just praise anyone, Yugito thought after hearing Sasuke's words. There was bitterness in Sasuke's words though. But she could not say that the Sandaime was not strong. The man had been far superior. His lightning defense made it impossible for normal jutsu to hurt him. You could throw jutsu of all natures and neither would scratch him. Naruto decided not to comment on Sasuke's words. Anyone has potential to become a superior shinobi. But those with Kekkei Genkais have far better chances. Jinchurikis are also a special case. If they are smart, their ability to learn is not limited by anything. He paused for a moment. You have the Mangekyo Sharingan, those eyes put you above others. But when you become dependent on them, your ability to grow becomes limited. It is the same with Yugito and any Jinchuriki who uses her Biju's power. Once they become dependent on it, they cannot grow further. Ultimately, they become normal. There was some silence as both Sasuke and Yugito absorbed Naruto's words. Sasuke had been told something like this by Kakashi while they were training together. In fact, it was not once that the Junin told him of that. He always reminded him until he fully understood. Yugito was the first to respond though, I am not fully dependent on my Biju's chakra. And I think that people have limits to their growth potential. Naruto shook his head. The limit is the attitude. When the body can still function, there are no limits. It is a matter of whether you see yourself breaking the barrier of not. He then looked at Yugito. If you ask Matabi, she will tell you that a Jinchuriki's full power is when she combines their chakra with her Biju. When that happens, you become a perfect Jinchuriki. Turning into Matabi is nothing but imperfection. No matter how powerful you may appear, you are imperfect. Turning into a Biju only makes you an oversized giant that can only do two things, smash and fire a tailed beast bomb. In other words, stop calling yourself a perfect Jinchuriki because you are not. All you can do is hit things with your paws and shoot large balls of chakra. That is how much it sounded like to Yugito. Those words did not do her pride any good. She felt like transforming into Matabi and show him who was imperfect between them. But she could not do that since her access to the Biju's chakra was blocked. You are rather talkative, Sasuke noted. Naruto mostly never gave anyone advice. Especially given that Yugito was a stranger. But Naruto was talking to her like he was very much familiar with her. Perhaps it was because they were on the subject of power. Naruto could never miss that kind of subject. He was sort of an expert at the subject. You can even feel it when he speaks. The problem was that he never chooses his words carefully to accommodate the weak-minded. Naruto had not noticed that. Perhaps it was because of my sleep, he thought. But did not matter anyway. It was not like he was exchanging pleasantries. And he was even willing to teach an enemy a few lessons. Don't you think that this woman needs to hear these words, Sasuke? He asked. Again, in his usual style, he did not wait for Sasuke to respond. She is a Jinchuriki I just saved. I had to come all the way from Konoha to save her from Akatsuki because she was weak. I am giving her a way to become strong so that she would not need to be saved next time. I do not wish for her to remain weak, but rather I want her to become strong. He explained his reasons for speaking much words. I am not weak, Yugito said through gritted teeth. Had it been someone else I would not have been defeated. Those two just could not die. Now she refused to be called weak, especially by a person who did not even know her. Some people wished they had her strength, and some blonde from Konoha has the audacity to call her weak. It is true that he saved her, but that did not mean that he could say whatever he wanted about her. She would not stand for those kind of words. Sadly though, Naruto felt no worth in commenting in her words. How generous of you, Sasuke remarked. The remark sounded a bit sarcastic though. Perhaps the Uchiha was angry with Naruto about something. It might have been that he knew about the Uchiha massacre and yet did not tell him, or the fact that he had said that he did not care for people who were killed. And yet he seemed to care about some woman who was nothing to him. Naruto raised a curious eyebrow at Sasuke's eyebrow. He shook his head. Would it not be a pain to keep saving the same person over and over again when you can show them how to become strong so that they can protect themselves? Sasuke looked at Naruto stoically, taking after his brother. He wanted to snort or do something else. But at the end he nodded at that. Even he would rather have someone become strong on their own so they could protect themselves. By now, Yugito was being ignored, which did nothing to please her. But she settled for not saying anything. And besides, it would be sad if she were to get killed because of her imperfection, Naruto said looking ahead. He could feel the gates of Kumo right ahead. Sasuke actually stopped walking when Naruto said, sad. He did not think that those words would leave the blonde's mouth. He did not think that he could be capable to feeling them towards a stranger. Even to Yugito, even though she was a Jinchuriki. So to have things cleared for him, he questioned, what do you mean sad? Not in the sense of being actually sad, Naruto answered shortly without pause. Sasuke actually nodded at his answer as if he understood things perfectly. Of course, this action confused Yugito greatly as she did not understand what was going on. Why would it be sad? Is it because she is a Jinchuriki? Sasuke questioned curiously. His expression had changed from the one of stoic to curious one. Somehow Yugito did not feel good about all that. But she refrained from voicing out her thoughts. She was going to part ways with them soon anyway. She would say thank you from the bottom of her heart and leave them. She would not be faking her thanks. They really did save her life. The least she could do was to be thankful. Going back to the scene currently playing, even if she were to voice her thoughts, there was a 90% chance that she would be ignored by Naruto since the question would be directed at him. Perhaps, Naruto responded. This woman is a proud kunoichi and Jinchuriki. How many are there in Konoha? Out of all the women you have come across, has there been anyone like her, Sasuke? Somehow Sasuke did not like what Naruto was getting at. What are you saying? You seem to be incapable of finding a woman on your own. And I had thought since your sensei was somewhat of a pervert, you would have learned a few things from him. Naruto shook his head. Yugito glared him, seeing where he was taking the conversation. This woman is quite fine to be the one to bear your children. A few moments ago, she was thinking of attacking me even though she could feel how superior I was to her. That leads me to conclude that she won't be like flames that you can bend anytime you want. Sasuke was thinking if he should be embarrassed or angry. The situation to Yugito was slightly amusing while at the same time infuriating. Are you suggesting that I become toy to produce children for him? Yugito questioned in a deadly calm tone. Naruto looked at her and smiled slightly. Sasuke seems to be shy around women. Igniting things like this is my way of helping. He seemed to ignore her question. I don't see anything particularly wrong with him. Would it be hell to live with him at the Uchiha compound? Guess not. Yugito stared at Naruto blankly. How could he ask her such a thing with straight face? Was there something wrong with him? Generally there was nothing wrong with Sasuke. But people just did not say such things like he was. Are you even hearing yourself when you speak such things? She questioned. Naruto ignored her question. You did not answer my question, he said. So now because you saved my life you think I should become his wife and cough out children for him. What do you think I am? You still did not answer my question. Naruto seemed to sigh at this. But I was not saying that simply because you were saved. Like I said, you have the personality to be the right woman for Uchiha. And unlike some women Sasuke might bring, I won't be annoyed each time I see you, he said. So you are not thinking about me but you and what you like, Sasuke said. Forget it, Yugito is not interested in you, Naruto said with a shrug. Most importantly, you are annoying me. I might just kill you for that, Naruto said narrowing his eyes at his left side where Yugito was walking by. But he was not looking at her, but towards the trees. You sensed them, Sasuke said knowing that Naruto was referring to the Anbu that had been tailing them for quite some time now. I thought since you were busy talking you would not have noticed them. I did. But since now I have lost interest in the conversation, their presence only annoys me. Anbu should be trained better than this. Even I who is like a walking light bulb can hide better than this, Naruto said flatly while Yugito chose to remain silent on the matter. Sasuke sighed. I doubt that, he said referring to that Naruto could hide better. In the way he was now, it seems impossible for him to achieve that feat. He looked at Yugito. Tell them to go away before he really kills them, he said. Yugito raised a curious eyebrow. He would do that even though this is Kumo territory. If he did that that would be provoking trouble and anger of the Raikage. Sasuke nodded. I doubt he would care about the consequences, he said. But they were not here to cause any trouble in the village. He would like it to be that way. Yugito nodded and signaled for the Anbu to return to the village. They were close to the village now, there was no need for them to be following them. You are different from him, Yugito said. These two Uchihas when they were talking seemed to be nice people, despite Naruto's blunt way of putting things. They were not trying to scare her each time they got the chance. They merely allowed her to walk and talk freely. But when they were silent, it was another story. Sasuke shrugged in response. He was not going to say anything else to that matter. Naruto and him were different people, that much was obvious. He was not going to speculate anything further to that. Yugito was still a kunoichi from a village that was not in friendly terms with Konoha. He was not going to give her any more personal information than Naruto has. She was not an enemy but definitely not an ally either. There was silence for a moment. Yugito recalled that Naruto had called her Biju by its name. No one other than her was supposed to know that. That was what she had been told. Matabi had informed her that humans did not bother to learn of their names but simply chose to call them by the number of tails they had. That was because humans only saw Biju as nothing but mass source of chakra, weapons that needed to be controlled by them. They did not even think that they had names and a mind of their own. But Naruto had actually called her Biju by its name. How do you the name of the Biju I hold? Yugito asked curiously. Naruto just looked at her with nothing to read on his face. With that look, Yugito knew she was not going to get an answer. It is not like I can do something with that information, she said. I know, Naruto said. But the matter is simple, I just don't want to tell you. Yugito responded by glaring at him. But Naruto was no longer looking at her. Even if he had been, he would not have been bothered by her glare. He would have probably just shrugged it off like it was nothing. She resigned in glaring at him. Once we get in the village, I will probably be separated from you. No doubt the Raikage's Anbu are waiting at the gates. If you need anything before you leave, go to Training Ground 0, you will find me there. You are returning to training in that condition? Sasuke questioned with a raised brow. He would not be surprised if she was going to kill herself in training because of what Naruto had said. Yugito shrugged. Once the seal blocking my access to my Biju's chakra is removed, I will be fine, she said. Since we have arrived, Naruto turned to face Yugito. Come here so I can remove the seal, he said. Where is the seal placed? Yugito asked curiously. Where do you think? Naruto responded with a question. No, Yugito said. She was not going to be stripping in front of him. Someone I trust will remove it. It was good that it was placed while she was still out cold. Naruto shrugged and looked ahead the large gates of Kumogakure. He could sense several chakra signatures from the gate. Well, to avoid unnecessary unscripted plays, he would have to play nice. But he was not going to be bowing down to anyone in the village. The Raikage and his searches had returned back to the village when they had not found Yugito anywhere. Surely the man would have much to say to him and Sasuke. But the man would definitely not say thank you. He did not expect him to say so though. In fact, he would be disappointed if the man thanked him for returning Yugito. Kumo gates. Just as thought, the gates were swamped with shinobi from the village, mostly Anbu though. They seemed to have been waiting for them for quite some time. But given that since they neared Kumo territory, they cooled down their pace, it was obvious that they would have been informed. They could have come to get Yugito outside the village. Staying inside was the safe choice. Who knew what could happen if they went outside and forced Yugito to be handed to them? They were not looking for a fight even though they were in their home turf. Sometimes it was just better to avoid conflicts. Meaningless conflicts only resulted in unwanted deaths and sorrow. It was best to allow people to live in their peace and keep them away from sorrow. Shinobi were protectors of the village they belonged to. They had to make the wise decisions so not to put the civilians in danger. Making stupid choices could only bring about damage. It would be either to them or their enemy. But often even when one was a winner, there was always a heavy price that was paid. I did not think there would be these many, Sasuke said looking at the people gate. There were about 2 squads of Anbu and more than 12 other shinobi standing at the gates. That was not including the gate guards and the other Anbu who were obviously watching from afar. Paranoid people act like this, Naruto replied. But it is quite lively. He looked outside the gates. That was someone he was familiar with, that he was sensing. He wondered what the man was doing at this village. He seemed to have been waiting for them. The Raikage is surely going to be pissed if you keep talking like that, Sasuke stated shaking his head. Naruto merely shrugged carelessly in response. It was of no consequence to him if the man became infuriated. If he could not handle mere words, then he was weak-minded, not worthy of being a Kage. Words had power in them, but someone of a Kage is not supposed to be riled up by anything that was said. 2 people came running towards the 3. The others seemed to just watch as they ran happily. Another woman, with blonde hair, seemed to just walk behind them without hurry. Yugito, one of them 2 yelled. She was certainly a woman and the other was a man. Both wore standards Kumo Junin vests. The woman rushed over to Yugito and hugged her with bliss all over her face. The male merely watched with a lollipop on his mouth. But neither Sasuke nor Naruto stopped for the show of affection. Karui, you are hugging me a little bit tight, Yugito said, wincing because she had yet to fully heal and the woman was squashing her in her hug. Sorry, Karui responded, letting go of Yugito. We hurried off to find you when we heard you had gone alone on a mission. When he came to search for you, we did not find you, she said, still holding Yugito's hands. I will explain everything later, Yugito responded as she began to walk forward to look at catch up to Naruto and Sasuke. Omoi and Karui followed her from behind. Naruto stopped for a moment when he laid his eyes on the woman that was standing in front of him. She had blonde hair and a large bust. The most thing that stood out though to Naruto was her cold eyes and impassive expression. He found himself fascinated by her stare. It was almost like his. The woman stared at him with her expression never changing. But something seemed to flash across her face for a second. She had felt his oppressing chakra. But chose not to comment on it. The Raikage did not ooze off such power. No one she had seen had been able to reflect this much power she was feeling from him. Sasuke looked between the 2, and smiled. A perfect match, he thought. Both had the same expressions, perhaps they had more things alike. Naruto should not have gotten himself involved with Yugao. To Sasuke, this woman in front of him was the one who was supposed to be in that position. But then again, they had a minimum of 4 wives to marry. Naruto only had 2. He could add to that. But something like that seemed impossible. Follow me, Samui said in a flat tone as she turned around towards the gate. A perfect match indeed, Sasuke thought aloud. Even her voice sounded like the blonde's. Perhaps Naruto himself had noticed this. A perfect match for what? Sasuke heard a voice asking him from behind. He looked back to see Yugito staring into his eyes. Nothing, he answered, going back to the way ahead. I saw that you were looking between Naruto and Samui. Could be perhaps thinking that they could be a perfect match for each other. Yugito questioned calmly. This time, everyone heard her, including Naruto and Samui. But neither commented on it. Sasuke shrugged. I might have, he admitted without fear. He was not going to say otherwise. He was much in a good mood to be threatened by anyone at the moment. No threat to him would be phasing. He could handle them all. Especially given now that he has awakened the prized Mangekyo Sharingan. Jiraiya, for how long will you keep playing hide and seek alone? Naruto spoke, suddenly surprising the group. Just then Jiraiya made his presence known. He was holding a notepad and a pen in his hands. For some reason he had a disappointed look on his face. What a way to ruin the moment, the perverted toad sage grumbled. If Naruto had not spoken, he could have gotten something for his research. The conversation being carried out by Yugito and Sasuke was a good one. It was befitting to be added to his books. But the blonde just had to open his mouth before things could get to the good part. Samui was indeed desirable. Her bust rivaled Tsunade's and her cold look only made her desirable to him. Have you lost children in some parts of this village? Naruto questioned, ignoring Jiraiya's words. The Sannin then walked closer to the group. He raised a brow when he got the feeling from Naruto, but did not say anything. It was new. For now, he would leave it as it was. There was also Sasuke's eyes, they were also new. He would not question that now, but when it was just the three of them. For now he was going to pretend like he already knew about those eyes. It seemed that Sasuke was not even attempting to hide them. In fact, he seemed to be showing them off. It was no doubt the Mangekyo Sharingan. An interesting development. No doubt it had something to do with Itachi. Back to Naruto's question, the blonde knew that he had no children. What he was saying, that he and Sasuke were not children that needed him for babysitting. I figured if I did not come here, you would leave this village, having not minded you words towards the Raikage. It is my duty to ensure that no such thing happens, the Toad Sage said. So you came to stop me from saying anything the Raikage would find insulting, Naruto said, earning a firm nod from Jiraiya. Laughable? Yep, he said it. What is it that is laughable? Jiraiya questioned with narrowed eyes. How you will succeed in what you came for, Naruto responded, earning looks from the Kumo group. Sasuke said nothing. It seemed that it was nothing new to him. This, of course, surprised them because Jiraiya was supposed to be a legendary shinobi. Who spoke to him like that? Most people referred to him as Jiraiya-sama even with his perverted antics, but yet Naruto simply called him Jiraiya. Samui narrowed her eyes at the blonde. Interesting fellow, she thought silently. The group that had been standing at the gate was now looking at the Konoha shinobi with impassive expressions. Naruto disappeared in a blur and appeared behind the group. The speed was so fast that only a few had seen him move. The Anbu arrived at him when he was already walking forwards after passing the group of shinobi. Things became tense when the Anbu pulled out their swords and pointed them at Naruto. What one would expect Naruto to say in this situation would be, "How annoying," and he indeed said that. It was a surprise to the Anbu that he could only call the situation he was in annoying. Who did something like that? They could cut him if they wanted, but all he could say was, "How annoying." But the Anbu did not let that get to them. No, they stayed strong and stared at the blonde behind their masks. The aura of his oppressive power could be felt quite clearly. It did not make it comfortable for them to stay that close to him. But they were Anbu, if they were to run away, who would stay behind? Who told you to step inside the village? The leader of the group asked in a monotone voice. He was staying strong, his fellow Anbu to follow in his example. Naruto seemed to sigh before responding in an even tone, "Is that rhetorical? Step back so that we can take a look at your pass. If everything checks out okay, we will let you pass." The Anbu leader spoke again without fear or wavering in his stance. "And if I refuse, we will take appropriate measures like cutting your head off your neck." The words seemed to amuse Naruto. I refuse, he wanted to see if they could actually cut off his head before he did that to them. It was a question of who was faster between him and the Anbu pressing their swords at him. The situation looked not to favor him, but he was not concerned for that all. Before anything could happen, Jiraiya intervened. "Come on, Naruto. Don't do anything stupid. This is Kumogakure, not Konoha. We have to abide by their rules and there will be consequences should we not do that," the Toad Sage said. He then looked at Samui. "Why aren't you saying anything? Aren't you the one who invited them to follow you? It was not completely Naruto's fault. The Anbu were just being difficult. The blonde had come into the village to return their Jinchuriki who could have been captured by Akatsuki had it not been for him. But they were still trying to assert their authority over their blonde. Naruto did not bend to that kind of thing. Samui shrugged. She was simply enjoying the show. Shadow, let him pass. Raikage-sama has allowed him entrance to the village, she spoke in a still flat tone. The Anbu knew that already. Perhaps they just wanted to provoke the blonde and see how he would react. Given his fame, it would not be a surprise if they just wanted to see if really he was strong as people say he was. Slowly the Anbu sheathed their weapons and walked away from Naruto. They disappeared into the shadows. Follow me, Samui said again walking towards the direction of the Raikage's tower. The group then followed her from behind. Jiraiya walked towards Sasuke and whispered into his ear, so have you chosen which one you will take out of the two blondes? Personally I don't care who you pick. Any of the two is fine. I don't have such thoughts in my head right now, Sasuke responded. Jiraiya sighed sadly. No wonder you are still a virgin. Naruto has even bettered you. In this area you should be better than him given his attitude. I gave you a copy of my book and Kakashi gave you a few tips, and yet the wells are still dry. I am not having this conversation with you, Jiraiya, Sasuke stated in a cold tone. It was annoying when the man started to speak about his personal life. His life was just the way he wanted it to be. He would not be pressured to do anything he did not want. Ungrateful brat, Jiraiya mumbled. I was just trying to help. The Sannin looked between Samui and Yugito who seemed to be conversing. How long have you been with them? Samui asked. Them, was referred to Sasuke and Naruto. About 2 or 3 days, Yugito answered. She had spent most of the time sleeping. And she did not know long she had been at the place she had been kept before she came to. They did not do anything bad to you, did they? Karui questioned. Before Yugito could respond Omoi opened his mouth. It will be the end of the world if they did because Raikage-sama would be angry and would try to make them pay. Then Kumo and Konoha would become locked in a war. Soon he was cut off by Karui. Shut up, Omoi, she yelled loudly hitting him on the forehead. Ouch. That hurt you FL, he held his words back when he saw the murderous look on Karui's face. Ah, we are now close to the Raikage's tower, he said trying to change the subject quickly so not to be the receiving end of Karui's righteous fury. Raikage's tower Jiraiya looked at Naruto. It would not matter if he showed a stern face. The blonde would do what he pleased. But it did not hurt trying. He had been right when he said he could not stop him from saying what he wanted to say to the Raikage. But at least he was here to do damage control should there be a need for that. Naruto, he called in a defeated tone as they were about to enter the Raikage's office. Just don't provoke the Raikage. Intentionally. The man is quite emotional and easily angered. That was quite true. I was known for his quick bursts of anger. It did not take much for the man's fuse to light up. A few things said or done and the man would be breaking walls. He was not about to have the man do any that under his watch. He would be like a mediator between the two. The Raikage also had his way of saying things. He was proud and never did quite admit to anything. Naruto was also proud and refused to bow to anyone. If the Naruto lights up a fire, he would be sure to be there to put it out. If the Raikage does start the fire, it would be no problem because Naruto is not the one to suddenly attack someone because of some words. He did not know what it would take for Naruto to actually lose his calm. So far, he had never seen the blonde, uncool. He was always calm and collected. Regardless of what one said to him, he would always remain calm. He was not the one to suddenly rush into a fight rashly without thinking. In this coming meeting, he knew that regardless of what the Raikage would say to Naruto, the blonde would not lose his cool and suddenly attack the man. If he was to attack, Jiraiya knew that Naruto would request a nice place for them to do battle. But a fight between the two was something he was not about to have. If those two fought and the Raikage ends up losing, he would definitely dislike Naruto even more. Who knew what would creep into his mind should he lose? And Naruto was not the one to give up a fight just to make someone happy. Perhaps he would let you win for a moment just to build your confidence so that he could crush you with your full confidence. Cruel. Jiraiya was aware of that. Naruto was ruthless in a fight. It seemed like it was his pride and joy. Fighting the Raikage would certainly excite him. This talk is becoming annoying, Jiraiya, Naruto said, clearly not pleased with the fact that the Sannin was repeating his words. He had heard him the first time he spoke. He was not that stupid to do things that would provoke trouble between Kumogakure and Konoha. The same could not be said between him and the Raikage. He could care less if the man hated him. In fact, it was pleasing that the man hated his guts. His enemies would be thinning out soon. He had to find someone to amuse him after he had dealt with Nagato and Obito. I am just thinking of what is best for Konoha, Jiraiya said, not fazed by the look Naruto had. Sometimes you put your own amusement before anything. If anything less favorable between Kumo and Konoha were to occur, civilians are going to be in danger. I would like to avoid that. We have already suffered enough, the Sannin said in a firm tone. Aside from the Third Shinobi World War, Konoha had been unfortunate to lose many of their shinobi and civilians during the Kyuubi's rampage. It was one of the most tragic nights in Konoha, one that will never be forgotten in the village. Many lost their precious that day. Most of all, Konoha lost its Hokage. If that was not enough, their former shinobi, Orochimaru, now dead, orchestrated an invasion to the village by the Sound and Sand. Although the invasion was dealt with quickly, there were still 2 or 3 who lost some of their precious people. Even at that time, Konoha lost a Hokage. Another event with similarities to the previous ones would surely cause panic to the villagers. Over the previous 2 events, none of the Hokages had been able to make it out alive. They all ended up dying for the sake of the village. It was true that they were happy to have heroes such as them, but it was at the same time sad that they had to lose them. Finding someone to replace them was not easy. The village also weakens considerably when the cage is down. Potential customers also leave the village when its leader passes away. The good thing is that each time Konoha has been able to recover and still stand as the strongest. Some may have thought that they would be weakened considerably when the Kyuubi ran rampant within the village and killed many. And then their precious yellow Hokage died, sacrificing himself for the sake of the village. One would think Konoha no longer had one worthy to be Kage. But that was not to be. Hiruzen stepped up and took the mantle of Hokage again. He saw the village return to its former glory without even looking weak. Orochimaru came and Hiruzen died, but the remaining Sannin gathered and made the village stronger. Naruto shrugged as they entered the office of the man now hailed as the fastest man in the elemental nations. Minato was dead, so there was no one who could match his lightning cloak. Well, that is what people think. The Raikage was sitting comfortably behind his chair with his brother standing on his right hand. And another man standing on his left. The man on his left had a bored look on his face. He was Darui, a black lightning user, a rare ability to make black lightning. The eyes of a looked at the Konoha shinobi for a moment before going to Yugito. He smiled seeing her well. His eyes then returned to the Konoha shinobi, to be precise, Jiraiya. How nice of you to come again, Jiraiya, he said, leaving the formalities. With the Akatsuki still running loose, it is bound that I come here often, Jiraiya responded in a mature tone. And he could not allow Naruto to be alone with the Raikage. A nodded and looked at Karui and Omoi. He gave them a look that clearly said, leave, this is above your pay grade. The two did not waste time, they hurriedly left the room without saying another word. Would you explain to me what happened? The Raikage was still looking at Jiraiya. But the Sannin also had not details as to what really happened. I am also in the dark as you, Jiraiya said, shaking his head. I just met them at the gate. Only those 3 can explain to you what happened. Yugito. Yugito only said what had happened before she was beat by the Akatsuki members, Hidan and Kakuzu. She did not give out a detailed report, knowing that she would give out one after she had gotten the right medication from the hospital. The Raikage was surely going to question her more once the group on Konoha left his office. By then, she would give a full report of the events that transpired leading to her capture. How interesting, Naruto said when the Raikage seemed to have been in thought after Yugito spoke. Gyuki's Jinchuriki, a top Junin and the fastest man in the elemental nations. This seems to me like those 2 were brought just to show off Kumo's prized assets, the blonde said. The Raikage narrowed his eyes at Naruto. Can't the same be said for you, 2 Uchihas and a Sannin? Perhaps, Naruto said. He seemed to release a yawn. I thought this scene would keep me interested for some time, but it has not. It has started off rather boring. He then turned around. I will be around the village, Sasuke, when you are done with this little play. Look for me. Where are you going? You have not told me of your side of the story. And why you happen to know when the Akatsuki would attack Yugito. Naruto did not turn around as he responded. Sasuke can answer those questions, he said. Before Naruto could leave and could respond, Killer Bee spoke, no so fast, 9 yo. Or should I say former number 9 yo Jinchuriki. This caught Naruto's attention. He turned around to face the Jinchuriki. Bijuis can speak to each other telepathically when at a certain ranger. They can also sense each other within a container. Yuki must not have sensed Kyuubi within me to know that I am no longer a Jinchuriki. I should have expected the octopus to tell you that, the blonde said. He did not appear to be alarmed by this in any way. His face remained as it was. Killer Bee raised a curious brow. Naruto seemed to be knowledgeable about Bijuis with those few words he said. And the fact that the blonde did not deny anything was surprising. He was not afraid that something like that had been brought out. By the looks of Sasuke and Jiraiya's face, it seems that they were not aware of it. But that would beg that question, why was Naruto calm about it? So it is true after all. You are no longer a Jinchuriki, Jiraiya said, not even surprised by the revelation. I suspected that much when you summoned the Kyuubi and Kurigakure. When a Biju is sealed, it is impossible to do that. You can only transform into the Biju. But yet you summoned it. What made me think otherwise was the fact that once a Biju was extracted from you, death was automatic. You would have died if you extracted it. There was also the fact that no one had seen the Kyuubi anywhere. If you had released it, it would have been noticed already. A hateful beast such as the Kyuubi cannot stay still at a single place. That would explain why he never uses the Bijuis chakra. I mean, ever since we were genin, he never used the Kyuubi's power. It was all his own power, Sasuke stated. I thought when you were talking about a perfect Jinchuriki, you were talking about something you have actually experienced yourself, Yugito said, quite surprised that he was no longer a Jinchuriki as people believed him to be. I was only telling you that so that you can escape your weakness, Naruto said. Naruto, do you know what will happen if Konoha's villagers find out about this? Jiraiya asked seriously. He just hoped that the Raikage did not use this for his own benefit. If news like this spread out, there would be great panic in the village. I can only imagine myself standing at the Hokage monument watching them tremble with an amused expression on my face. It would be amusing knowing that the Kyuubi can never reach Konoha, but yet they will continue to think, it's coming. Naruto's obvious disregard to the health and safety of Konoha's villagers was surprising to the Kumo shinobi. What do you mean, it cannot reach Konoha? Figure that out yourself, Naruto shrugged. Ah, my clone has found a perfect place, he said looking thoughtful. He said nothing more as he disappeared in a quick burst of flames. When did he make a clone? Sasuke thought. He had been with the blonde all the way to the village. He could not have made a clone without him knowing about it. Especially when his Mangekyo had been activated the whole time. This does not do any good to us, the Raikage said, seeing the look on Jiraiya's face. He is already powerful on his own. As Sasuke has said, he has never used the Kyuubi's power. So since then all he has been doing was with his own power. On top of that, he has the Kyuubi with him as a summon. This means he can fight another battle while the Kyuubi also fights another battle. But with our Jinchuriki, they cannot fight like a summoner and a summons. Jiraiya nodded, understanding the Raikage's words. This in fact is Konoha more good than bad. If Naruto uses the Kyuubi as a summon, it offers more chance of destruction without being limited as seal. The Raikage sighed, and asked Sasuke to tell his story. Sasuke explained everything, but left out parts of Naruto's death and where exactly they took Yugito to. But he did make mention that after Naruto had killed off the two Akatsuki members, they returned to the Fire Country. He also did not say anything about Zetsu nor Itachi. Kumo did not need to know about those parts. Does Naruto have a contact within the Akatsuki? I find it hard to believe that he would have known about the danger without having someone from the inside tell him of it, I asked curiously. Jiraiya shook his head. I don't know, he said. I want you and him out of my village by tomorrow. I would have told you to leave now, but Yugito would not have allowed that to happen with what you did for her, the Raikage said, doing a 360 spin. That's fine, Sasuke said, turning around to leave as he shrugged. I don't know about Jiraiya, but Naruto and I were not planning on staying longer anyway. If it had been my choice, I would not have even set foot in this village. When those words left Sasuke's mouth, the Raikage called his Anbu to find Naruto and discover what he wanted inside his village. He also sent Samui to look for the blonde. She would make a good one to gather intel on the blonde as she was hard to read and was quite perceptive. Her personality fitted the mission very well. 2 hours later, away from the village and everyone else, Naruto was sitting at the far end of the village of Kumo at the rocks. It was just a place that was full of rocks, nothing special. He had been conversing with Zetsu when he had sensed someone come nearby. He had not thought that Anbu would come to him at this place, especially since he was not mingling with Kumo business and its villagers. They would be annoying him with their presence should they have been following him inside the village. To avoid being annoyed by the flies, he had chosen to rest at this place. It was a nice place. He could relax without any noise invading his ears. Sometimes being close to other people only brought about noise that was nothing but nonsense and things he did not care about. Having some time alone would allow him to gather his thoughts. And it was also a good spot to speak with Zetsu without eyes watching him. This sport provided a good place for some fresh air to hit about his cold skin and drip its fangs within his flesh. He did not care about the scenery though. When he had sensed the person, he had realized that the person was not even attempting to hide her presence. This person was coming to him, telling him that she was not hiding to be here. He was also quick to notice that because of the fact that his chakra had been misbehaving recently, it had affected his senses and control over it. It was not anything good. He enjoyed perfect control over his chakra, and anything less than that was not satisfactory, especially when he could do something to change it. He would have to get back to extensive chakra control exercises again to regain his perfect control. Samui walked towards the rocks, the place the Anbu had informed her they had sensed Naruto. They did not go to see the blonde though. After sensing him, they had immediately come to her to tell her of it. It was her mission to find out what he wanted from her village. The Raikage had assigned her to do it. But she was rather bored, and hated this kind of mission. Well, at least her target was someone who seemed interesting enough. He did not look the kind of person to bore the life out of her. If that was so, she could contend with it. She finally saw his figure, sighted down. His gunbai was just beside him, leaning against the rock he was sighted on. Although he was not looking at her, she knew he had already sensed her. She had not even attempted to hide her presence to begin with. She also not reading anything much into the fact that he had not been looking her way. Someone like him would not even pretend not to have noticed her presence. He must have had his reasons. She was not interested in them though. She was curious about him though. He was an interesting man after all. She doubted that anyone would not find him an interesting fellow if they had a curious personality about them. She walked calmly towards him, still he did not look her way. But then he looked into her eyes after she had sighted down on a rock. Looking into hers, just like the last time, his eyes did not travel anywhere on her body, but her eyes. She was sure he was not gay. But yet he did not even steal a glance at any of her assets. That Jiraiya had stolen a few peeks a number of times while she had been in his presence. That man was a pervert, that was for sure. I sent you to see what I am doing in his village, I presume. Naruto started the conversation while he was still looking at the woman in front of him. Samui made no attempt to deny it. She merely nodded. He wants to know what you are doing in his village, she said, again not even attempting to hide anything. He had to have known what she was doing here. But saying it did not mean that she actually expected him to tell her what he was doing at the village other than having to return Yugito. She had an idea that he would not give her any answer, if what she has seen so far is anything to go by. Ah, the cautious type, Naruto said. And then there was silence, comfortable silence. Neither Naruto or Samui minded of it. The former had come here looking for the silence to begin with. That is an interesting weapon you have there, Samui said after a few minutes of silence. Well, it felt like a few minutes. Naruto looked at his gunbai before picking it up. He threw it at Samui. It is quite effective in both defense and offense, he stated. Samui caught the gunbai with little effort and held it by its handle. She examined it for a few moments before speaking. It seems that way. It's quite rare to find a weapon like this, she said. Shinobi of today look for something sharper. If they have a weapon, it has to be a blade. A blade can kill, but a gunbai cannot cut like a sword. It is also not usable like the fans Suna wind users use, Naruto explained briefly. You also favor swords as they are more effective in channeling lightning chakra. A weapon like this cannot work the way I want for a weapon. But it feels cool, Samui replied, throwing the weapon back to Naruto, who caught it before placing down. Nothing much was said after that. Naruto decided to just meditate while the woman chose to sit and enjoy the quietness. Later that day Naruto went on looking for Sasuke when the Uchiha had not come his way. He did not look for long though. He found his clansmen at a hotel with Jiraiya. They had seemed to be talking about some things. Neither of them had smiles. Naruto did not even try to figure out what the Uchiha had been discussing with Jiraiya. The Sannin probably had already noticed the difference in Sasuke's expression. It was no longer the happy face that it had come to return after his training trip with Kakashi. The news of his brother's missions had done quite a number of his mentality. But eventually he would cool down. I thought you would have returned to Konoha by now, Naruto said, looking straight at Jiraiya. He had done what he had come for. What more reasons did he have to stay around the village? Jiraiya's expression turned serious. He had not spoken about anything with Sasuke as he wanted Naruto to be around when he spoke. How could I have gone back after making a few discoveries? What is so important to be regarded as discoveries? Jiraiya looked at Sasuke's eyes, before looking back at Naruto. Sasuke's Sharingan and the fact that you are no longer a Jinchuriki. I had suspected that you no longer were a Jinchuriki, but I just did not think that it was possible. The Toad Sage paused for a moment. Do Sasuke's eyes have something to do with Itachi? You ask me that question. If you want answers, question Sasuke. If he does not answer you, don't come back to me. It is his decision whether to say it or not, Naruto replied. He was certainly not going to say anything in that regard. That was Sasuke's problem. If Jiraiya wanted answers about the matter, he would have to speak with Sasuke. He also did not think that Sasuke would be answering any question given the state of his mind. Perhaps at a later date, he would answer, but at the moment, Jiraiya was not going to get an answer. Sasuke. Jiraiya said, not bothering to repeat his question. The Uchiha had heard him question. It was no longer important for him to repeat it. That would be unless Sasuke acted like he did not hear it, but it was certain that he heard the question. Sasuke stared into Jiraiya's serious expression with a blank one. I do not have to answer that question. Whether this involves Itachi or not, I do not think I am at liberty to share it with you. He gave a response like one Naruto would give. If Naruto had been training him, he would have definitely be pleased. Jiraiya continued staring at Sasuke for a moment. He then around to look into Naruto, but the blonde still had his impassive expression on his face. The Sannin shook his head. This was something he was not going to win. Perhaps he was just getting too old for this, uncontrollable brats, he mumbled. Naruto looked at Sasuke. You will leave alone or with Jiraiya? Something came up that I have to attend to. And I have to leave about now, he said. Great, Sasuke said, that definitely sounded sarcastic. I will also leave now, he said, getting up. There was nothing keeping him inside this village. He wanted to get home and think things over instead of staying in a village where the leader had already made it clear that he does not want him. The Raikage had made it clear that they were to leave tomorrow. He was also not going to ask where Naruto was going and what business he had to attend to. There was a 100% chance that Naruto would not tell him. Given those odds, it was best to keep his mouth shut. He also had his own problems to deal with, and getting into the blonde's business was not in his to-do list. He was a bit more concerned about what was going on in his mind. Jiraiya could leave on his own. He was not taking the way home with the Sannin. Some time alone to organize his thoughts was need. If he were to leave with the Toad Sage, he would never get the chance to think. Wait. Jiraiya said, in a slight loud tone. Where are you going? You can't leave just yet. We have yet to discuss about your case. Sasuke ignored those words. They were not directed to him anyway. Finish up your business quickly. We have things to discuss when you return, he said, looking at Naruto. It was not a request, more like a demand. The blonde merely raised a brow at the tone Sasuke had used. He seemed really serious about wanting to talk. The Raven head did not wait for Naruto to respond since he was not making a request. He left the room with his things. Jiraiya stared at Naruto sternly. You really should have told me, Naruto. What if the Kyuubi somehow find its way to Konoha? What if someone had found the news and used it to bring panic to Konoha? It was not important to tell. And if it was important, I would not have told you about it, Naruto answered. Jiraiya seemed not to have clearly understood the response as he questioned again. Why did you keep it a secret? It was not a secret, Naruto replied. I just did not make anyone aware of it. And you just did not bother to verify your suspicions with me. Like you would have given me the answers, Jiraiya said sarcastically. He sighed. This is really troublesome though. Sasuke has the Mangekyo Sharingan, and he was not even hiding it. You are no longer a Jinchuriki. Something clicked inside his head as spoke those words. Is the Akatsuki aware of this? Yes, Naruto responded. Well, that is at least some good news. They won't be attacking Konoha to get the Kyuubi, Jiraiya said, sounding actually relieved about it. The Akatsuki would not attack Konoha to get their hands on the Kyuubi since Naruto no longer contained it. Even if they were to come and attack the village to get it, there was 99.9% chance that Naruto would not tell them even though villagers were to get killed because of that. Everybody was aware of Naruto's non-caring attitude. Most of Konoha's confused civilians remained oblivious to this. But some were aware of that fact. Jiraiya knew these when saying his words, but he was not willing to say it out loud. Naruto was not dense, he knew that too. Well then, Naruto said, turning away from the Sannin. I will take my leave. Where are you going anyway? Jiraiya asked curiously. He might have been going to Oto, but he doubted that. Perhaps to some other village. But if he was going to other villages he would be aware of it. Chapter 26. Yap, Uchiha Naruto indeed. Naruto's hideout. Naruto stared at a map in front of him. He did not just want to be in power in Konoha only, he wanted to be the source in all the elemental nations. He wanted cages to come to him looking for business, looking for assistance. That is why he had set up Otogakure. The village was key to everything, but even if it was lost, which was nigh impossible, he could still create something again. Possibilities were endless as long as he lived. He wanted the name of Uchiha Naruto to be known everywhere, his name had to be law. He would create something, and influence his power to make the cages and leaders of villages come to him in all their humbleness. If that happened, he could have all the quietness he could need. He could get rid of anything that was the enemy and then he could relax. Koyuki, the princess of the land of snow, was going to be in Otogakure in a few days. She would meet Karen and Guren, but he had made sure to have them mention his name since she already knew him. It would make the negotiations easy. The land of snow was more advanced in technology than any other village. He wanted the technology to be in Otogakure, and they are the only land to use trains, he needed their manufactures. He wanted to create a railway that would be all over the land of fire, coming from Oto. It would make Otogakure reachable to anyone and in a short period of time. One would be lazy to visit the village, but they would surely go there once the train was built. Having sent Karen to Otogakure was certainly going to work on his favor. It would truly. The girl worked with Orochimaru and knew her way around a laboratory. She had a scientific mind. With what he was thinking now, he could have her training stopped so she could focus on the project he wants her to do. He would make sure she got the funds she needed to build her lab. She would head a division which dealt with technology and research. The girl also knew a lot about the human body, she would be useful in that area in terms of experiments. The experiments would be different from the ones she did with Orochimaru though. Another matter would be a research facility. It would be helpful if he had such facility that would contain all known information about everything within the elemental nations. He would have to find the location of such a facility though, since it is bound to be huge. He looked again the blueprint of Otogakure. There was still a large space that was not occupied in the west side of the village when looking from the gates. It was not far from the Crystal Palace, it was just a few blocks away. He wanted to build something big there. But it would not be as exquisite as the Crystal Palace. Nevertheless, it would probably be the largest building in Otogakure. He wanted to build the building for various things. The first floor would be a hall, where meetings will be held. Since he plans to have all cages under this thumb and dancing on his palm, he would have them hold meetings in such a place. The land of iron would no longer be needed to hold cage meetings, but Otogakure will host such meetings. This floor will also have a large kitchen. The second floor will be a library, a large library. The library will be in different sections. There will be the shinobi section, and village history section. This section will hold all the history of all villages. He had all that knowledge at his disposal. The library will also include a lot of things that will be probably useless to him. It was not that he would even use the library given that he already knew everything he had to know. But he to sell the act, it would be made. The third floor will be a place to relax. Karen and Gurren could figure out what to have in that room. He was not going to figure out what women needed to relax. His mind could not process such things. So the space for this floor, he would leave for the women to handle. They would be the ones supervising everything, and draw out a clear plan for the building. He was just drawing out the general idea and plan for everything. It was different for the Crystal Palace since it would be his home. But this was just for those who would be dancing to his music. The fourth and fifth floor would be for accommodation for the delegates from other villages. This was for Gurren and Karen to plan how the rooms would be and their designs. Or perhaps they could hire someone who had a better vision and creativeness of such things. He was best at fighting and manipulating jutsus. But he found out that if he gave it time, he could actually do this kind of things. Perhaps it was something that was inside of him before he met Madara. Perhaps mind was not so focused on dancing with Nagato, murdering Obito and becoming Hokage after all. But if he could have all these done, he could then rest. Perhaps he could smile for his mother after all these. There had to be somewhere he was going, and he had that place. His mind was set on it. There was nothing or anyone that would stop him. All that tried to get in his way would be removed. In that mind of his grandfather and all his love for fight of death, he still wished to rest in peace in a world of no conflicts, in a world where dreams come true. He understood the story of his grandfather from his childhood to his death. Madara himself had not told him anything. He was just given brief details. But Black Zetsu was more than willing to share everything with him. Even the most evil men do want peace. Wouldn't he want a world where Karen and Yugao could live safely? Naruto shook his head at such thoughts. He had been having them lately. And he was not enjoying them. Zetsu then walked towards him. You seem to be thinking a lot, he commented looking straight at the blonde. Naruto looked at him for a moment before taking a seat as he had been standing when looking over the maps and blueprints in front of him. It seems I have, Naruto acknowledged. My mind is a little blurry at the moment. I can't focus too much on anything. There are a lot of thoughts singing and dancing within my head. Madara never trained him like how Danzo trained his root Anbu. But he was trained to keep better control over his emotions and thoughts. Perhaps you should take some time to relax, Zetsu suggested. Regardless of how you look at it. Naruto was still human. His body could feel pain like any other human. You have been working hard since you met with your grandfather. Ever since you started training seriously, you never got to rest. You also spent 3 years training, and only resting when your body could no longer move on. You also had a biju extracted from your body and almost died. You have been working hard ever since training, absorbing all the knowledge you can. And recently, you had died. Naruto was silent for a few moments before finally speaking. Pathetic, we humans are such fragile creatures. My body can resist and absorb any pressure, but yet my mind does not operate at the same level. It is a pity that it cannot be perfected like the body. So you are just going to continue working with your mind not perfectly focusing on objectives. He made sure to add the word perfect just to make Naruto understand the situation. He knew well enough if there was something made now and it was not perfectly because the blonde was not too focused. Once focused he would have it made again so it could be perfect. He did not want to deal with it. Yes, Naruto responded. But I will head to Kurigakure first. Before I return to Konoha the songs will have already quitted down. He paused as he was about to change the subject. What do you have for me? The princess wants to you see. She was informed of your part before she decided to go to Otogakure, Zetsu explained. Naruto had not been told of the last part. It had slipped his mind when had talked to the blonde about it before. Koyuki. Zetsu nodded his head slightly. Why does she want to see me? Gurren can hold the talks just fine without me. She did not say, but I think it is personal. Your name was known everywhere and you did go on a mission your Team 7 that saved her life and returned her to her village, Zetsu explained lightly. No, I have other things to do, Naruto replied. He had no personal business with the woman. The mission was a mission, nothing more. It was not like he had gone there to be a hero or something. I have not finished explaining, Zetsu smiled. Oh, he was going to enjoy the look on Naruto's face when he says the next words. The princess has no other family relatives and the title as ruler of the land of snow is handed down to family. Her family has been the one to rule the land ever since its founding. She does not have any family now who she can pass on her hat. What are you getting at, Zetsu? Naruto questioned with narrowed eyes. He was having an idea of where this was going. Her council has been pressuring her to marry so she could have a child who she can pass her hat to. They have been arranging dates with several profilic political figures for her. But she has rejected all men saying she does not like them, Zetsu smile again. This is gone be good, he thought. You have power and are known. You are not just a military figure, but you can play politics as well. It is not no longer a secret that the near-extinct Uchiha clan is looking to be restored. I think she wants to make a marriage proposal, he continued smiling as he watched the blonde in front of him. Naruto merely stared at Zetsu with an expressionless look on her face. He grew silent for several moments before muttering something. Madara never had to deal with this crap, he said. Her request has been denied. He did note that Zetsu was enjoying this. But he did not comment on it. He would rather focus on something. She will be informed when she gets to Otogakure. What more do you have? There are some unwanted people in Otogakure, they are businessmen. They do illegal business in the shadows and cover it up with legal business. I have identified 3 very rich men. They have settled in well with their families there, Zetsu reported. He had yet to tell Gurren about this. She may be leading Otogakure now but she did not have the final say in everything. Have them terminated. If such people were to fill in my land, I will be having an uncontrollable land soon. Such people are arrogant and love power too much. If not removed soon, they will start making annoying noises and bring misbehaving children at my doorstep, Naruto responded calmly. He was not going to have people who would only be annoyances in his land. And he hated illegal businesses. What of their families and businesses? Now Zetsu certainly did not care about their families, but their business would be useful. Before terminating them, make them hand over their legal businesses to our ghost company. Gurren will think of what to do about the families. Have her send shinobi to dispose of all the illegal business. With the boss gone, the chain of control will collapse and things will go haywire. Zetsu nodded. If we were just to leave it like that, they would break apart and become many and pollute more lands. Some who are loyal will also trouble Oto as they come to investigate the matter. But to avoid more pollution and annoyances, we flush them, he added in understanding of Naruto's thinking. Have it done soon, Naruto said. He had no problems in taking the business of a man who lived off by watching other people suffer. He felt no shame in taking their business and making use for it to Otogakure. The ghost company worked for this matter. He always made sure no evidence was left and no one could trace everything back to him. Has my new gear been prepared? Zetsu nodded slightly. Do you want it now? No. I will take it when I leave, Naruto replied standing up. I have to spend the next few days training. And I also have to do the finishing touches on the Hashirama. He picked up a scroll and handed it to Zetsu. What is it? New developments for Oto. Hand it to Gurren and have her start everything as soon as possible. Like the previous projects, I want these ones done to perfection. He then disappeared into the darkness of the hideout to do his needed training. 3 days later Konohagakure, Sasuke sat alone in the Uchiha compound trying to wrap around his mind about the fact that his clan would have been standing. He would still be having his parents and brother if it had not been for Konoha. But at the same time his family had attempted a coup d'état. The village would have been plagued into chaos if that had not gone along. This village was co-founded by his forefather, Uchiha Madara. He could not abandon it, but he failed to comprehend why all this could happen. Was it worth killing everyone, even the innocent people just so there would be no rebellion? He certainly did not think so. The world was a lot more screwed up than he had thought. He had thought he had seen everything with Kakashi, but he thought wrong. Konoha had more dark secrets than he would like. What he did not fully understand, was why Naruto would simply sit and not do anything against the village. The same was also for his beloved brother, who even in his death still wanted Konoha to be safe. Itachi and Naruto were two complete different people. But for both of them when it came to Konoha, they did not lay a hand on it. Despite everything, they wanted to see it standing. Why was it like that? The village had forced his brother to massacre his entire clan. Naruto had been abused in his childhood because of his former Jinchuriki status. This village was rotten, despite the blonde saying otherwise. The Yondaime was his father, they did not even respect the son of the man who sacrificed his life for their lives. He had not even heard a single person saying he was sorry to Naruto for the way they had treated him when he was a kid. They pretended like nothing ever happened. They pretended like they never used to hate him. It was all something he could not understand. How could they be like that? Well, he could understand why Naruto dislikes them. They were two-faced hypocrites. And they used to worship him for being the last Uchiha. He loathed all the attention they used to give him. They could be even smiling to Naruto because of fear. He was not weak like in the days they used to show their hatred towards him. Naruto was much more powerful, and not only was he a Namikaze, he was also an Uchiha. They knew if they smiled at him they would have a hero. They would have someone powerful to protect them. They all saw him at the Chunin exams, they all heard what he did in Kiri. If they show him hatred, he could turn on them and massacre them all. Fear, it was indeed a beast. He had no doubt that the blonde was aware of this. He knew that Naruto was aware of their thoughts. It was why he never bothered to interact with them. They had no standing place. They were only loyal to he who was powerful, to he who could protect their pathetic excuse for lives. There was also, if you do something against Konoha I will kill you, those were Naruto's words. He knew clearly that the blonde did not make idle threats. It was also rare to hear him make threats. And here he had been threatened. He was positive that the blonde was one to keep his word. The blonde was also stronger than him, but yet he felt no fear of him. He could do whatever he wanted and still not fear the blonde. There was also something that was holding him back from doing anything rash. It was inside of him, like a little voice telling him to calm down. He was brought out of his thoughts when he saw the door open. It had to be Yuga or Kakashi. No one would come in here and simply walk in without knocking other than those two. Ah, it was Azuki Yugao, looking lively as always. Hello, Sasuke, she greeted with a small smile as she walked towards him. Sasuke forced a smile. Somehow he had been finding it difficult to smile since coming back to the village. Hi, Yugao-san, he responded as polite as he could be. It was this time that he wished he could not fake things like Naruto could. If the blonde had no smile, he would not force it. Is Naruto in? She questioned still standing. Since she heard the Uchiha had returned from a successful mission to stop the Akatsuki, she had decided to come here. He had left with her blonde love interest, she thought they would have returned together. No, we went our separate ways after dropping Yugito, the Jinchuriki we rescued. He said he had something due to before returning. Sasuke paused as he watched Yugao's slightly disappointed look. Did he say when he will return? Her disappointment was also clear in her tone. Sasuke shook his head. No. I don't know when he will return. He seemed preoccupied with something. And after everything, I think he wants to clear his thoughts, he explained in thought. He was not sure, but it was a guess. The blonde did not look quite himself. Oh, that seemed to make her smile, somewhat. I will be gone then. Have a good day. She then turned around to leave the house. She stopped though as she remembered something. Your friends are outside looking for you. Friends. Yugao nodded. Your peers, they must have heard you came back alive and well after encountering the Akatsuki, she explained before leaving the house, slowly. Sasuke stood up as he went towards the door. Well, I guess I can use the distraction, he said to himself as he went to see his peers. No doubt they wanted to see him so that they could do somewhere and laugh. Perhaps the distraction would help him forget about his thoughts for some time. But he knew he could not run away from them forever. After this, he would speak to Kakashi about it. Kakashi could offer some help. He was the only one he knew who could offer him support and trust, aside from Naruto. Kurigakura a week after Naruto finished his training, he had Zetsu summon him within Kiri. He had spent time doing 4 different trainings, a few shadow clones did the finishing touches on the Hiraishin. He had been able to finish working on it and make use of it. Of course, his use of the space-time jutsu was not as good as Minato. He had also been doing advanced chakra control exercises with a number of clones. A number of clones were putting into practical what he had been learning over the past 3 years in medical ninjutsu. He was no good in it, like a medical ninja. But he had learned a few basics. Madara had studied Hashirama's medical ninjutsu. The man was a god in terms of medical ninjutsu. It was another point that Madara had to admit that Hashirama was also superior to him in the regard. It was also not different from him. He could only learn the basics, and apply them. Despite wishing to surpass everyone in all areas, medical ninjutsu seemed to be beyond him. But he did not necessarily need it since he would always make sure that he was not wounded carelessly. His disease had troubled him because he was not very level best in the medical department. Well, it did not matter anyway. He had also spent time training, physically, to regain all his mobility. Over the past weeks he had not been able to move freely because of the annoying problem he had, but now he could move freely and even fight in taijutsu battles at a greater level than he could when he was a genin. He had worked his body day and night without rest. He had only rested a day, before coming here, but it was not enough. He would rest while he is back in Konoha. Once getting inside the village, he had walked peacefully towards the Mizukage Tower. He was not hiding himself or his presence to anyone. He did not do such things. People were able to recognize him though, but when they did, he took the rooftops to avoid annoying noises. The Anbu had also taken notice of him, but they kept their distance. It was probably because they knew who he was. Although it was annoying that they kept following him, he did nothing, nor even look at their direction. Finally arriving at the Mizukage Tower, he used the entrance to enter the tower. No one would think that he was there to assassinate the Mizukage given that everyone had seen him. But that did not stop the Anbu from watching his every move. He walked within the tower, without getting lost until he reached the receptionist. He looked at the woman. Is May in? The woman looked at him with a blank look. May. He studied his features before looking away for a moment. She looked at him again, this time smiling though. You mean Mizukage-sama? Naruto did not respond. She is in. Let me go and see if she can see you now. There is no need for that, Naruto responded walking towards May's office leaving the receptionist to shrug her shoulders. May's office. Naruto opened the door without even knocking. He found the woman taking a nap with her head rested on the desk. Her Anbu must have not told her I was coming, probably to surprise her, Naruto thought as he stood leaned against the door frame and folded his hands across his chest. This is a lovely surprise, he said calmly, enough to startle the Mizukage. May woke up abruptly as she heard the voice. Her eyes became wide slightly as she saw who it was. Naruto. She studied him from head to toe. He wore a new attire. He was wearing a dark red cloak, it had high collars, and it reached underneath his knees. Under the cloak, he wore black pants, like always, and a black shirt which was visible because his cloak was not fully zipped from the front. He also wore black gloves and black shinobi boots, as always. He did not have his gunbai strapped behind him or any weapon that she could see. He was also not wearing his headband, she noticed he was not wearing it even in Konoha. The new look fitted him quite nicely. In front of her was her fiancé, not the man who always wore armor everywhere. She smiled at him, a pure genuine happy smile. She stood up and walked towards him. Without even thinking anything, she engulfed him in a warm hug. Naruto did not respond at first. But with a sigh, he wrapped his arms around her. She did not let him go, she just hugged him with a content smile on her face. Odd, Naruto did not feel like pushing her away. He felt something, like when his mother hugged him, but it was different, yet there was the same warmth. Finally May let him go and pulled him in before shutting the door. Naruto, how good to see you again. After our last talk, I did not think that you would come here. So soon, her tone sounded a bit bitter at the last words, yet she was smiling happily, a genuine smile. She ushered him to sit down. I did not think I would come here soon, Naruto admitted honestly. But things change and I thought it would be best if I dropped by, he then offered May a small genuine smile. The smile only made May smile even happier than she had been. Your change of wardrobe is applaudable. I did not think you would leave your comfort zone, May said, changing the subject. He had admitted that his armor made him comfortable. It was something that she found curious. The armor was made to protect, then if he was not wearing it he would feel naked. It was outrageous that the blonde would feel something like that. This is just something I chose to wear. I felt the need for the change, Naruto explained in a rare smooth tone. This was something original. He was not wearing something that someone used to wear. It looks good on you, more than your previous attire, Mei commented while still smiling. So what brought the change? She asked, returning to their earlier conversation. Naruto looked straight into her eyes. When he had been in the afterlife, he was alone, like he had been before he met Madara. There was no one there with him in the afterlife. The experiences he had told Zetsu was empty. It seemed as if it was his life, it was empty. That brought much thought to him. He did not want his life to be empty. If he had not been revived and met with his mother again, what was it worthwhile that he could tell her that he had achieved? If he had met his grandfather, what was it that he could tell the man? He had yet to kill Obito, he had yet to become Hokage. Anything useful that he had done now was only Otogaku. But for all his worth and power, it was not enough. How he loathed talking about emotions. Why? Because it reminding him of his emotionally damaging past. He had never worked on that with Madara. Just a few experiences. Finally he responded to Mei's question. While he was still looking straight at her, his eyes changed from the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, to the normal Sharingan, before coming crystal blue. My original eyes were blue. Mei then realized that each time she saw him, it had always been his Sharingan, not the normal eyes. She also noticed that he used past tense in reference to his eyes. Were. Yes, but I'd rather not get into that. Mei became silent for a moment. Naruto had just shown her a part of him that she did not know. His tone was not as blank as it had always been. This was something huge, especially coming from him. He had shown her his original eyes. The crystal blue eyes he was born with. Mei felt her heart race slightly. This was not a dream but a reality. After seemingly blowing her off a few weeks ago, he had traveled here and was now speaking to her. She felt happy. Why don't we go to my house and talk there? She would have to cancel her meetings for the day. She and her fiancé needed to talk. Mei's house, the Mizukage, had gotten rid of all the Anbu that were stationed in her house for some privacy. She did not want anyone close as she talked to the blonde. She had not even taken a walk with him to her home. Instead, she used Shunshin to teleport here without anyone making a fuss. She settled down on her couch and looked at the blonde beside her carefully. Can I get you something to drink? It seemed the most logical question she could ask first. Naruto shook his head. No, he said before leaning back on the sofa. You have done quite a good job with the restoration of the village. I had not thought that you would have succeeded this much with little resources, he commented over the state of the village. He had kept an eye on the village's progress as it was in his interest. Mei smiled. You believed that I could do this much, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. It has not been easy, but when the people you are willing to work with you in your goal, much can be achieved. And I have been determined to get this village going again. When people work together in unity, they become strong, and can achieve much more together. Nothing can be impossible to achieve. He paused for a moment. Mei looked at him strangely. One of the ideals of the Senju, he clarified. It was not his motto, but he did see the logic in it and saw that it was beneficial. That ideal is true. I mean, look at what this village has done because it is united, Mei said, agreeing with the belief of the Senju clan. Without being united, they could have much problems between them. However, when united, they would always work together because they had the same goal, seeing their village restored to its former glory. I can see that, Naruto said calmly. He could see that with unity, this village had achieved much. He could not deny that unity had worked well for them. It also decreased the level of disturbances and rebels in a nation. There was something of that sort in Otogaku. But what I have been doing here is nothing much compared to what you did in Otogaku. The village was just made of a number of hideouts used for experimentation and cells for holding people. But you have turned it into a proper village. Anyone who sees it, will love to be allied with it knowing that there will be good economical benefits, Mei stated with a small smile on her face. Otogaku was truly blooming into becoming something. There was some chance that it could become the richest place in the elemental nations. As much as I like good things, I cannot take all the credit for the work being done in Otogaku. Gurren has done much to see what Oto is today. I merely gave her the direction and the connections, she had to see that everything was well placed, Naruto explained. He just gave the woman people to connect with, money and plans for projects. She had to see that the projects were running perfectly. I am not saying she does not deserve some credit. I am just saying, Otogakure is your vision. She then paused for a moment. But with the village blooming like this, don't you think other villages will start to move towards to conquer it for their own? Otogakure does not have that much of shinobi, and without you it can be conquered easily. Major villages tended to be like this when a small village began to rise. They did not waste time to try to take it as their own. Smaller villages were quick though to act these days because they quickly aligned themselves with another major village for protection. But Otogakure was only connected with Kurigakure, and the village was not in any position to offer military support. It may look like Otogakure cannot protect itself, but that is not the entire truth, Naruto stated, drawing a look from Mei. The only shinobi you can see in Otogakure are only a few, but there are a number of them that are not within the village. Orochimaru's hideouts are spread across the entire elemental nations. Over the hideouts, I have spread over 500 men who have been in training since the new Otogakure began to form. Over 500? Where did you get them? The Sound Country had a number of shinobi. They might not be many to fight over one of the great 5 hidden villages, but the training they have been going through will make them strong enough to repel any nuisances. I favor quality rather than quantity, Naruto explained briefly. He had made sure that this was done in secret because if other villages were to know about this, they would surely be trouble he did not want to deal with. That also reminds him to have the shinobi district increased. The millions ryo he would get from the crooked businessmen would surely help. If the pockets dried up, the projects would stop. But he had ensured that money was not an issue by swooping businesses that made millions, sometimes close to billions without paying a cent. But it is still not enough. Even if they were to be of high quality, large numbers would always overwhelm smaller numbers. But there was still the blonde to go through. She doubted he would stand still and watch his village being taken by someone. What I have is enough, Naruto said. He still had his summons. The Kyuubi alone could level an entire platoon of shinobi within minutes. He knew for sure that the beast would happily do that. Mei nodded. So that is what those apartment blocks in the north side of the village are for. I was wondering why they there. I had them built so that when the elite return to the village, they can have homes, Naruto stated. He sighed, shaking his head. Iwagakure has already made a move on Otogakure. I keep sending corpses back to that fool. I think sooner or later that fool Onoki will have his shinobi match over there, even when he knows that Oto has an alliance with Kiri. He has no doubt that Kiri won't be able to help them. What will you do if he makes a violent move towards Oto? You can't protect it without exposing that you are behind it, Mei questioned. If Naruto suddenly appeared to protect Otogakure, people would assume he is behind it. Other than that, it might cause some problems with Konoha. My involvement with Oto is no longer an issue. The village has come out of its first stage and I think some already suspect it. But if Onoki attempts to conquer Oto, I shall have him fear Uchiha Naruto. There was no doubt that the Sandaime Tsuchikage would come to fear the blonde from his tone. Even Mei had no doubt about that. The question, though, was what would he do to make the Tsuchikage fear him? There was some silence before Mei decided to switch the subject. She looked at Naruto inventively. I am happy to see that you came here, Naruto. But what is it really that you came here for? Naruto raised an eyebrow at her question. She sounded slightly serious. I did not think that I would need a reason to see my fiancé. Isn't that what you insisted on before you left Konoha? Mei did not know if he was being sarcastic or not. She could not tell by the look on his face. He was the one to have told her to put things on hold because of his reasons. She had been bumped out it, but here he was now, calling her his fiancé. What was really going on here? Are you really Naruto? Her question only seemed to amuse the blonde. So you are Naruto? She paused for a moment waiting to see if he would say something. But nothing came out of his mind. What changed? You treated me like crap last time we spoke. And you were an uncaring, cold-hearted bastard, he spoke honestly. Naruto, though, felt no offense in those words. She almost cursed him when he just shrugged. It has been brought to my attention lately, he did not seem to be concerned about it though. Well, he never did seem concerned about anything. That is because it is true. I should have told you that before I left. The person who told you that must know you better to know that even if she spoke those words, you would not be offended by them. Mei stated calmly, while looking straight at the blonde. Why do you Terumi Mei take interest in a cold-hearted person like me who cares for little and does not treat you with care? I don't even return any of the affection you give to me, I hardly respond to any emotions. I am curious, as to why you like me, Naruto stated in a calm reserved tone, laced with a bit of curiosity. He watched her, from head to toe, his eyes analyzing her everything action. All he got from her was honesty. Mei smiled at him. I questioned myself once in a while. But in the rarest of moments when I saw you smile outside of the battlefield, I knew that deep inside you are a good person. I can tell that not every part of your heart is filled with darkness. You have power, but you don't use it for evil intentions. When you came here for the first time, I could not say this because I could never really understand you. But now I know that something unseen draws me to you. You had problems in the past that left an emotional scar. You try to suppress your emotions, because it is this emotions that gave you pain when you were younger. If you had been as you are now when you were younger, you would have never experienced pain. This is why you hate dealing with emotions. I would imagine that in your past, you had much pain, and if not dealt with, it will take much for you to recover. You not as cold-hearted as you think you are, but one thing is for, you are selfish and only look after your interests. You also dislike making emotional attachments because that would make you deal with emotions. Tell me Naruto, what do you think when a man rapes and abuses women? Evil men and death, Naruto responded shortly. See, you know what is right and wrong. You would kill anyone who makes anyone suffer because you know what pain is. What I am trying to say is that, despite all your flaws and questionable choices, you are still a good person. With the right people beside you, you can do much for this corrupt world we live in. And there is also the fact that you are handsome young man, she winked at him in the last part. Naruto shook his head, ruffling his hair for a few moments before looking back at Mei. He gave her a small smile. You have made a good analysis of my personality and actions, that was all he could say after all those words Mei had said. After our last talk, I was quite infuriated and embarrassed really. I sold myself to you like a whore and you rejected me. I sort of felt cheap. When I got back here, I questioned why I even like you. And so I spent days thinking and making notes on everything about you, your past, actions, words and character. It was then that I came to this conclusion. She sounded proud of her accomplishment. She was not going to hide the fact that he had treated her like dirt. I don't know if I never noticed or just did not care you felt that way. But perhaps my lack experience in dealing with such situations is at fault. He seemed thoughtful as he spoke. You are definitely an interesting person Naruto. After all that I have said to you, you can still look that way, Mei stated smiling warmly. If I reacted differently, I wouldn't be Uchiha Naruto, now would I? His response actually caused Mei to giggle. Possibly for the first time because the blonde was always in a business mode speech each time he spoke to her. Nah, you certainly would not be Uchiha Naruto. But I guess that is what makes you unique. You say wanted to be loved and experience love when we were in Konoha, Mei nodded her head in agreement. When I was younger, I used to have such thoughts. I was just an orphan, thinking that my parents dumped me, I was lonely. Such things caused me to long for affection because I did not have any of it. And now, Naruto merely gave Mei a small smile before he took out a small box from his cloak. He handed it to Mei who took it with slightly shaking hands. When opened it and found a ring. It was beautiful. I find it hard to believe that you would get something like this. Or even have time to buy this. Where did you even get it? Mei asked while her eyes were staring at the ring. A friend of mine brought it to my attention that I needed to get you this. I honestly don't feel that such a thing is needed. But when I was in Kumo, someone pointed it out to me that I ought to even if I see no significance on it. She was the one who bought it. Mei noted that he said she. But despite all his words, she still loved it. So you did not get one yourself, a realization dawned on her. I am a shinobi, was the reply Mei got from Naruto. So you would rather be armored with a gunbai, swords, and kune rather than wear a ring, she said earning a nod from Naruto. Mei shook her head at this. Nothing much mattered anyway, as long as he got it for her. She moved closer to him before staring into his eyes while her forehead rubbed against his. She then kissed him softly for a few moments before stopping to smile at him. I have always wanted to do this, so please don't reject me, again, she whispered softly. Mei then sat on Naruto as she again kissed him. As per her plea, Naruto did not reject her. Later that day it had already gotten late, but Naruto was still at Mei's house. They were sitting around a dining table, eating. It was a meal Mei had prepared for both of them. The woman was eating with a broad smile on her face. Naruto's expression had returned to being slightly impassive. He ate slowly without even looking at the happy woman across the table, she seemed to be in her own world. It was the first time she had ever cooked for the blonde and the first time she ate dinner with him. It was quite enjoyable. She then looked him after she had finished eating. When are you going to leave? In all truth, she did not want him to leave sooner. She wanted to spend the night sleeping beside her fiancé. After I finish eating, Naruto replied, simply looking at his food. Despite not looking at Mei, she could feel her frown at his response, but that did not make him look at her. He just continued eating. Why can't you spend the night here? I would appreciate the company, she was staring him. Naruto then looked at her before responding. I have to travel the whole night. You can't find anyone any boat at this time of the day. How will you travel all night? The boat or a ship was the only way to leave Kiri since the village was in the middle of the sea. And a distance away from the other shinobi villages. If the blonde had wanted to leave, he should have made arrangements during day. I have already made arrangements, Naruto responded, making Mei's frown deepen. Her smile was all but gone. Can't you postpone and leave tomorrow morning? I had thought you would spend the night here, Mei said with her deepened frown not disappearing. After all, he was just going to leave her. He had not spent more than a day here, and was ready to leave. I had not expected things to turn the way they did. But even though things went the way they went, my plans will not change, Naruto said, pushing his plate away from him as he had finished eating. What is it that you have to do that is enough to make you leave your fiancé in the cold? I have a meeting with the Fire Daimyo tomorrow morning. Fire Lord. Tomorrow. But you can't make it in time at this time. There is no boat that can get you to the fire country and you will have to travel after that, Mei said. Now her frown had disappeared. She could understand now why he could not miss the meeting. The Fire Daimyo was an important person. If one had set up a meeting with him, you had to show up or things would not go right. But then again, this was Uchiha Naruto. I told you I have already plans. It will not take me more than a minute to reach the wave country, he responded while he stood up. How will you do that? Mei looked at him questionably. Unless he was the Yondaime, she could not believe that. Naruto took out a three-pronged kunai, he then gave it to her. You know what it is. If there is anything, call me, he then sighed, turning away from her. His gloves were somewhere in the sitting room, he needed them before he left. Tomorrow is going to be one hell of a day. Fire Daimyo tomorrow morning, then I have to be at Konoha before noon. Not to mention that I will travel all night, he said to himself as Mei followed him from behind with the three-pronged kunai firmly in her hands. You know, when you came here, I thought you were going to stay for a few days. But I guess it can't be helped, she breathed a sigh. Well, thanks for coming here, it really did help clear my mind off a few things. Naruto nodded as he searched for his gloves. When he found them, he turned to the Godime Mizukage. Don't call me because you are bored, because if you do, next time you do it I will ignore you, he then disappeared in a yellow flash. Mei did not know if he was joking or being serious. But he certainly did not seem to be joking. Yet again, if he was joking, he would have kept it calm like he was not. She hated the fact that she could not read or get a clear meaning over some of his words. Well, it did not matter anyway. They got their relationship started. That was all she wanted. Soon, he would visit her more and spend the night. Mei smiled as she went to bed. Tonight, she would certainly have a good sleep full of blissful dreams. The following day, Konoha, Naruto needed rest, he had been depriving his body of it recently. When he does sleep tonight, he would certainly not wake up soon. He needed much rest. The trip to the daimyo's place had been rather dull. He did not waste time to teleport back to Konoha. He had returned while it was still morning. He had spent the day in the Uchiha compound. Despite not going anywhere, his presence had been made aware. Tsunade has sent for him, but he had taken his sweet time to get to her. When he went to her office, he did not find the woman, he only found her assistant. Where is Tsunade? He asked the woman who was sitting behind the Hokage's desk doing the paperwork Tsunade was supposed to be doing. Naruto did not care much about it. Shizune smiled nervously looking at Naruto. She did notice his new attire, it was less intimidating than his previous one. She did not how to respond to the question because of the reasons why Tsunade was not in. But she could clearly see that the blonde was waiting for an answer. She could not lie, the Sharingan could tell if she was lying or not. She went out to get a drink since she knew you would take your time to get here. The reason the Godime had even went out was because she had stashed away all of her sake that was within the office. Before Naruto could respond, Jiraiya appeared. He looked at Naruto. She is quite upset today, you should be careful with that you say. The man seemed to wince at his own words. Naruto noticed that he was bandaged from his right shoulder. He did not bother to question what had happened though. Upset is an understatement, Shizune stated leaning against the comfortable chair of the Godime. Sometimes she felt too comfortable while sitting on this chair. Perhaps it was because she sometimes ran the village on her own while Tsunade is drooling somewhere in her personal residence after drinking too much. Naruto was not too much interested in what was going on. But before anything more could be said, the door to the office was sent crashing through Naruto's face. The blonde dodged it easily. When he looked at the door, he saw the Godime Hokage glaring at him murderously. He had never seen the woman quite infuriated before. Tsunade was mad, not she was furious, scratch that, she was beyond furious. She was tired of Naruto. Seeing that Tsunade had not calmed down a bit, Jiraiya spoke, "You are on your own Naruto," he said before disappearing from the office by the window. Naruto barely heard him. But he could also see that Shizune also wanted to leave, she just could not because a furiously looking Tsunade was blocking her path. In the blink on an eye Tsunade was right in front of Naruto, with her first glowing with chakra. She pummeled the blonde in the chest with a left hook and sent him crashing towards the wall of the office. Shizune quickly ran away and none of the Anbu did anything to stop her. Doing something like that would certainly be hazardous. No wonder Jiraiya had left. The punch had not been that powerful, but it hurt like crap. Tsunade was not done though. She lunged into the blonde with her right hand in motion to strike. Naruto knew that it would not be healthy for him if he received the hit. He would probably spend much time in the hospital if he got hit again. The power if this one was definitely far stronger than the previous punch. His Mangekyo Sharingan was activated just as Tsunade pummeled him. The punch drove him through the wall and sent him flying a few blocks away. What was left was a large hole in the office of the Hokage. People tended to run away whenever a wall went down in the Hokage tower. Naruto crashed into a building a few blocks away. His cloak was ruined slightly due to his crash. He recovered quickly though and jumped down the ground. He winced as he did. I was lucky I was able to activate my Susanoo in time. If I had not, that punch would have shattered my rib cage. It got dangerous though, when her punch crushed my Susanoo. I guess her strength is indeed legendary, Naruto stated to himself as he dusted himself up. The villagers just watched him silently. He then realized that he was bleeding from his mouth. It was nothing though, so he wiped the blood off, and smiled slightly. That did hurt. He disappeared in a swirl of flames. He appeared within the office of the Hokage and found the woman sitting down, clearly ignoring the hole in her office. He could see that she had calmed down a little. Jiraiya then returned to the office, but stayed away from Tsunade. Naruto-kun, he narrowed his eyes from behind. Are you hurt? Shizune asked politely. She wanted to heal him if he was hurt. She knew that those punches did not do anyone any good. It seemed a stupid question to ask after seeing him being punched through the wall. But this was Uchiha Naruto who was punched. I can help myself, Naruto said taking a seat. Shizune nodded and went away. Naruto unzipped his cloak from his chest down to his waist and tore his shirt. This exposed his well-toned chest. The blonde did not care if the Hokage was staring at him, or if he could feel some eyes boring into his chest from the shadows. His hand then glowed green and placed it on his chest, surprising both Jiraiya and Tsunade. The former was the one to speak though. You can use medical ninjutsu. It is just what every trained shinobi ought to do. I am rather pathetic at it. But isn't it for every shinobi to have the basic medical ninjutsu skills? Naruto responded with a shrug. While surprising the Sannin that he could admit that he was pathetic at something, and by his calm tone. Regardless, Jiraiya nodded. But shinobi these days no longer take it seriously. They would rather learn elemental ninjutsu than medical. They don't know how useful it is even if it is just basic. The toad sage found himself agreeing with the blonde about this matter. Isn't that the ignorance of this generation? They would rather carry a knife than a shield. They focus most on attack than defense. Mei shinobi don't even have a jutsu that is only for defense, Naruto stated as he continued working on his chest. I have come across many of that kind. But the fault sometimes lies on the senseis. They don't give proper advice to their students. Our academy school is also flawed. The students are mostly taught useless things that will not help them in real-life battle. Really, most senseis did not teach their students the proper ways of shinobi. It was why this generation was weaker to the previous generation. There was also the issue of determination in one's training, which many of today lacked. That reminds me of Kakashi. That man is not fit for training ninjas. Perhaps if it were for motivation, he would certainly have been given an award for that. Well, he did do a good change with Sasuke and has changed. I may be wrong. Naruto paused for a moment. Perhaps, Jiraiya, you should retire and train the younger generation. Despite my lack of respect of your title as Sanin, I do no doubt your skill. It was until now that Jiraiya realized that he was talking to Naruto. When talking to the blonde, you had to expect such comments to come. Why should I retire? He questioned, glaring at the blonde. You are old and are past your prime. You have no children, no apprentice. There is no one to pass your legacy. What you had to offer was Minato, but he is dead. When you die, what will be your legacy? If I were you, I would be training someone to pass on to my will. You have lived past 2 wars, any day now, you could just drop dead. And the only one who will cry for you is her. By this time Naruto had finished working on his chest. He then zipped his cloak, ignoring his torn shirt. Now, then, Tsunade, can we get on to why you decided to relieve your anger on me? Tsunade had been listening to the two talk silently. It was like for the first time they talked silently without Jiraiya glaring at Naruto or Naruto throwing insults at the Sannin. Well, it started that way before Naruto became Naruto. Her anger had disappeared, but no completely as she listened to the points they made. They really did make good points, and the blonde said some important things. But there was one she would have to talk with Jiraiya about before the end of the day. Naruto's speech seemed to be different, but he was still blunt as always. But before anything, she had to ask something she noticed. Were you using the conversation with Jiraiya as something to keep you busy or as a distraction while you finished healing yourself? She had noticed that the moment the blonde finished healing himself, he immediately turned to her. Yes, he did not deny it. It was all truth. He needed to heal himself first before getting to the main reason he had even bothered to come into this office. This response did not make the toad sage feel any better. Tsunade nodded, before taking a sip of sake she had poured for herself while the two were talking. I thought you would retaliate. There were dangers to assaulting a Hokage, but she was sure Naruto did not care about that. And Konoha did need the blonde. Without him, there would be no Kyuubi. The Biju was another source of their power, they could not afford to lose it. No, I could have dodged your first punch, with the Hiraishin. But I wanted to see how it would hurt. What did not accept was for you to try another round. I must say, your legendary strength is no fuss at all. Even I could not have escaped that punch in one piece without Susanoo. He had made sure not state that he could use the Hiraishin. It would only make much noise now. I should have hit you harder, Tsunade said with a slight glare. But she did not notice he was not being sarcastic. Her legendary strength. If I had done that, I would have gotten you at my mercy and take you to the hospital where I would make sure you stay in bed for at least a month under my supervision. She had a dark smile about her as she spoke. She would give him medicine that ensure he could not move. Perhaps up until the time he would learn to behave. Naruto ignored all her words and changed the topic. You assaulted a clan head. Do you know what crime you have committed, Tsunade? He said in a slightly serious tone that caught the Hokage off guard. But before she could say anything, Naruto spoke again. Despite my question catching you off guard, you were going to retort, and say something like, you deserved it. You have no respect for stupid laws that only tie you down. That is what I wanted to see from you. Tsunade narrowed her eyes. She knew there could be a political fallout for assaulting a clan head. The clan heads were the second in power within the village. What are you saying, Naruto? Are you saying that you insulted the Fire Lord on purpose? Yes, he had insulted the Fire Lord and basically called him a useless old pipe that should just drop dead. She had received the report from the capital a few hours ago. The Fire Lord was not pleased. He had even threatened to cut off Konoha's budget, which would bring disastrous effects to Konoha's economy. She could not have something like that happening. No, Naruto responded with a shake of his head. What I expected is for you to react the way you did. I expected you to lose it. You lack emotional control, Tsunade. When ticked off, you cannot control your emotions, hence the broken wall. You even assaulted a clan head because you cannot keep your emotions under control. It is quite unbefitting for a Hokage. In your current state of mind you cannot make decisions that will be beneficial to the village. All you can do is do things fueled and clouded by your short fuse. At this moment it became cold with Tsunade's eyes glaring at Naruto dangerously and her killer intent rising up to high levels. But Naruto did not stop. This is not the first time you lose your emotional control and do stupid things. You became emotional and abandoned the village. This is not the first time you have broken walls, wasting valuable resources. You are even drunk right now. Tell me, in that state can you make good decisions? I can argue that you are not fit to be Hokage and make a really good case. With the village Lee, Tsunade snapped. The desk broke in half and the Hokage was in front of the blonde. The pummeled him to the wall again. But this time Naruto activated his Susanoo as he did not want to be hit again. She broke his small manifestation of the Susanoo again before he crashed into the wall, creating large cracks. Tsunade rushed at him and grabbed him by his cloak, lifting him up. She stared into his eyes angrily. You cold manipulative bastard. Did you do all this just to get my seat? She growled at him. By this time, the Hokage tower was flooded with Anbu. They were everywhere. Naruto, though, remained calm as if a single mistake and the woman could not snap his neck. You are making a foolish mistake because of your anger, Tsunade. You know very well that staring into the Sharingan is not good for you. The moment those words left his mouth, his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan spun slightly and the Hokage became dizzy, before she let go of him and fell down with a thud. He did not bother to try to catch her. It was her fault that she could not control her emotions. Well, he did provoke her on purpose knowing she would snap. When he took a step away from the blonde Hokage, Jiraiya was in front of him with a number of Anbu having their swords drawn at him. Is this a coup d'état? The Sannin questioned him with a seriously expression on his face and his tone mirroring his expression. His right hand seemed ready to form a Rasengan. Naruto looked merely amused by this. Sadly no, he responded. But it did not ease the tension in the office. Although it would have been interesting if it were one. What did you do to Tsunade? Genjutsu, you can snap her out of it anytime. I merely did it to calm her down, Naruto responded, ignoring the fact there were more than 10 swords pointed at him. And Anbu walked closer to Tsunade to confirm what he had said. I can confirm that it is a genjutsu. She seems to be having sweet dreams judging by her smile, the Anbu reported in a monotone voice looking at Jiraiya, the higher-ranked shinobi. Jiraiya walked towards Tsunade and picked her up. He put her on her seat before turning his attention to the other blonde. Answer her question. No, I am not after her seat. Naruto paused for a moment. Jiraiya, do not think that 10 Anbu can stop me from doing what I want. I know there are a lot of them here. But you should know better. That being said, when someone has their weapon pointed at me, I tend to become excited. And when I am excited, someone dies. You may be powerful, Uchiha. But you must not be at your right mind to think that you can defeat us all, a tiger-masked Anbu stated confidently. They were the elite of the shinobi in Konoha. He had worked with Itachi, who had the Mangekyo, but not even he was this arrogant. Contrary to the Anbu's words, Jiraiya had no doubt that the blonde could escape from the situation he was in. But he had answered the question. He did not think that the blonde would do things in such a manner if he wanted Tsunade's position. Before he could tell the Anbu to stand down, another spoke. Uchiha are very arrogant. Because of their eyes, they think they are above everyone else. Fame is certainly getting in your head, boy, Bor stated, making sure not to look into the blonde's eyes. Not in my right mind. Arrogant. A boy. Naruto smiled. It was not a happy smile. Foolish children. Then a bust of chakra from the blonde sent all the Anbu away from him. The chakra was so high and dense that the walls in the office began to crack due to the pressure, but most of all, the floor where the blonde was standing was left with heavy cracks. The bust of chakra was felt by everyone and made the Anbu tense the amount of chakra the blonde could release in just seconds. Jiraiya was quick to defuse the situation. Naruto, don't do anything rash. Raising your chakra that high will only put the village in panic, the Sannin stated, he too pushed back by the chakra the blonde had released. And I was getting excited, Naruto said shaking his head. He stopped his chakra lowering the tense atmosphere and putting the Anbu at ease. The Anbu did not get closer to him but he narrowed his eyes at them. Do you still think the Uchiha clan head is an arrogant boy who is not right on his mind? It was then the Anbu were made to realize that Naruto was not just a shinobi, he was the head of the Uchiha clan. He was in a group of those who were in power under the Hokage within the village. They had just insulted a clan head. And no. Naruto paid them no mind anymore. He looked at Jiraiya. It is about time to wake up Tsunade so we can get back to this meeting, he stated calmly ignoring all that was around him. The Sannin nodded and went on to disrupt Tsunade's chakra. But she did not wake up. He tried again, but nothing happened. This only brought back the tense atmosphere in the office. The Sannin looked at Naruto with a worried look on his face. Why can't she wake up? Naruto stroked his chin in a careless manner. I must have used a powerful genjutsu that affects her mind only. Only Tsunade can break out of it, but it is really difficult because the longer stays in the genjutsu, the more her mind becomes convinced it is reality. Unless that she will stay like that, he did not seem to be worried about it. This only forced the Anbu to get ready into action again because as it seems the blonde has put the Hokage in an unfavorable condition. How can you stay calm like that? Are you saying that the genjutsu can't be broken? Jiraiya yelled, his worried growing by the second. Overreacting will not solve anything, Naruto said. I can break her out of it, he said holding a ram seal. Nothing seemed to happen for a few moments before Tsunade finally stirred. If I do this next time I won't break her out of it. You will have to get a Yamanaka to get inside her mind to convince her that she is in a genjutsu. Seeing that Tsunade was coming back to life, Jiraiya motioned for the Anbu to leave. If Naruto wanted to kill Tsunade he would done it in another way. So he had nothing to be worried about. After the Anbu had left the Sannin sat down as Naruto did the same. For a second I thought you were going to kill Tsunade, he shook his head. Wasn't there any other way to calm her down? Shouldn't you be asking your shoulder that question? Jiraiya looked at his shoulder and winced the memory when Tsunade snapped at him. He had been trying to calm her down. But he should have known better that nothing works. I know that all Uchiha are good with genjutsu, but I did not think you used genjutsu. You seem to be the type to render your opponent immobile by cutting her legs than putting them on genjutsu. I only use genjutsu when I want to torture someone. It is not really torture, though. Naruto replied simply. How do you call it torture when she was smiling? Jiraiya asked with a raised eyebrow. The blonde Hokage did not have the signs of someone who was being tortured. She seemed happy. Tsunade has already spent more than 2 months inside her dreams. Experience. What she experienced in the illusion was her greatest desire. Conclusion. Tsunade spent more than 2 months living her dream life. When she wakes up, she will find out it was all but an illusion. Jiraiya glared at Naruto. Why would you do something like that? Because I can and I wanted her to know what was real. Tsunade is trapped up in her past and lacks emotional control. Her greatest desire is around those dead. She needs to look past that and look ahead. How can she focus on what is real if her greatest desire is with the dead? You are the same her, you are too focused on your failures and past that you can't look ahead. You are just being a Sannin before your miserable life ends. Tsunade is just being the Godime Hokage, trying to protect her grandfather's legacy. Protect. Nothing changes. Konoha will always be Konoha unless you and the Senju woman start having real dreams, rather than wishing for things you can't have, grieving about your failures. You are so proud of being Sannin but you have nothing to show for it. At least the Senju woman has trained some pupils in her likeness. But you, because Minato is dead, and you failed me, you can't look forwards, Naruto shook his head. How disappointing.